Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Purpose Vision Future Show. I'm Amanda Hill, and I'm coming to you from Canberra, Australia. Now, in all the episodes of this show, we've been talking about discovering your life's purpose, and one of the tools that you need to discover your life's purpose is deal with change, because that's certainly something that you will face. And if you want more information on discovering your life's purpose, you can find it in this book, which is How to Discover Your Life's Purpose and Put It into Action. And you can get that on the website, my website, purposevisionfuture.com. So that's that book. So don't fret if you can't take down all the information I'm giving to you, because it's all in the book. So when I was doing the research about discovering change, I found there was a lot written about change that we choose to go through, like giving up smoking or losing weight. And there was a lot written about change in organizational structure, how to deal with those sorts of changes, but there wasn't really much written on change that is imposed upon us. And that's the sort of change that I want to talk about today. So Nick Wojcik, if ever you're feeling miserable, look up Nick Wojcik on YouTube, because he is amazing. He is a beautiful Christian man. He's got no arms and no legs, and he's the most amazing speaker and preacher. He's just phenomenal. But when Nick was a child, his parents decided that they were going to move from Australia, where he lived, to the US. And so he had to go to school in the US. He had to start a new school in the US. And he found this really hard, because he'd been very popular in his Australian school. And in his new school in California, his teachers weren't used to having someone with no limbs, and they taught him differently, or they treated him differently. And the other children in the class found him a little bit strange. But eventually he got accustomed to that, and he dealt with that, and he started to make new friends, and everything was okay. And he became happy. And then on the 19th of May 2018, my phone rings. "Daddy's dead," my mum screams down the phone. "I'm on my way," I say, and hang up the phone. Mum had known my father for 54 years, and she'd been married to him for 50 of those years. So his death was a huge blow. She lost her confidence in things like driving and attending social functions and making big decisions. But gradually, as time went on and she journeyed through her grief, her confidence grew. Dad had always done all of the outside work, so she had to learn to do things like start the lawnmower, use a chainsaw and an electric drill. She was concerned about her finances, and so I eventually convinced her to get onto internet banking. Now she does all the outside work. She pays bills and checks her finances through internet banking, and she attends her local senior citizens club, and she also drives everywhere as well. So she's been able to get through that change. Now, when you're on the journey of discovering your life's purpose and living it out, you'll face a number of changes. Some of those will be changes that you'll have control over, and others will be changes that will be unexpected and that you won't have control over. When I first started on my journey to discovering my life's purpose, I had just lost my job. I'd just been laid off from my 17-year legal career. And the first change I had to go through was my loss of identity. I'd been a lawyer for 17 years. And so, you know, when anyone said, you know, what do you do? I'd say, I'm a lawyer. And for the last 7 of those years, I was able to say with pride, I am a legislative drafter. But then after I lost my job, I didn't know what to say. Because I couldn't say I was a lawyer anymore, because I didn't have a practicing certificate. And that's a document that we are required to have in Australia, which allows us to practice as a lawyer. And because I worked for the government for 17 years, I'd never actually needed a practicing certificate, because I had come under the practicing certificate of the senior lawyer in each government department that I'd worked in. So I couldn't say I was a lawyer. And I just started a network marketing business selling skincare. And I didn't really want to say that I was a skincare consultant either, because I felt that I really didn't know enough about the products to call myself a consultant. So I really didn't know what to call myself. So that was really difficult, loss of identity. The second change I had to face was going from an employee to a business owner. And as some of you would no doubt know, when you're an employee, the buck stops with someone else. You know, if I got sick at work, I knew that someone else would do the work. But as a business owner, the buck stopped with me. If I didn't do the work, it didn't get done and I didn't make money. So that was really tricky to go through too. And the third change I had to go through, which you may need to go through when you discover your life's purpose or you're on the journey, is the reaction of friends and family. I've said before that often friends and family don't understand what you're doing, because not everyone goes on this journey. And so my friends and family, some of them, they still thought of me as a lawyer and they still called me a lawyer. And I kept saying, no, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a skincare consultant. And some of them thought that, oh, you know, this is just a passing phase. She'll get over this. And so they kept sending me advertisements for jobs, for legal jobs. And I had to, until I begged them, please stop doing this. I'm never going back to the law. Stop sending me government jobs. And others of them just couldn't cope with the fact that I had left a professional career and was now selling skincare. They just sort of somehow thought this was beneath me, which it wasn't. Excuse me. And finally, the fourth change I've had to go through is mindset. When I was laid off from my legal job, I suffered feelings of rejection and depression. And when I started my skincare business, I had an initial sense of relief and acceptance. And then I'd hold a skincare workshop and it was being on a roller coaster. Whenever I held a skincare workshop and sold lots of product, I'd feel great. I'd feel really good. And then other times I'd hold a workshop and I wouldn't sell anything and I'd feel really bad. And I'd hold an event and no one would turn up and I'd cry for a week. And it was really, really tough. So the mindset changes were just incredible. But I found ways to manage these, and I'll talk about that in other shows. But so going through that has taught me a lot about change and how to deal with it. And one of the most difficult and painful changes that I need to go through every 8 to 10 years is changing guide dogs. Because as you probably know by now, if you've seen any episodes of this show, I'm totally blind. And I have a beautiful guide dog called Sadie. And unfortunately, I can't show her to you because she's too heavy for me to pick up right now. And she's lying asleep on the floor at my feet. So, oh no, she's just woken up. She must have heard me say her name. But Sadie is my fourth guide dog. So I've gone through this change 3 times now, and I have broken the process down into 3 steps, which I believe that if you go through, it will make change a lot easier for you. And changing guide dogs is one of those changes that I have limited control over. The Guide Dogs Association chooses a guide dog that I tell them a lot about myself and my life and what I do and the sort of dog I'm looking for, and they find a dog which they feel is a good match for me. So I have some control over that process. But I don't have control over the whole process. And many people think all sorts of interesting things about guide dogs. They think that the guide dogs can do miracles, but really they're very highly trained and they're very clever, but they're still dogs. And so Sadie, she doesn't have a GPS in her head. She's not like the GPS that you have in your phone or your car. You can't just say to her, Sadie, I can't get out of the car at a new location and say, Sadie, take me to the supermarket, because Sadie doesn't know where the supermarket is. I actually have to teach her all my destinations. What Sadie is trained to do is travel in a straight line and avoid obstacles and stop at stairs and roads. And she's also trained to target obstacles such as counters and poles and seats and doorways. So if I'm going to the supermarket, I'll say to Sadie, okay, right, we're going for a walk. So I'll give her left and right directions all the way to the supermarket. So I still have to know where to go. And when I get to the doorway of the shopping centre, only then will I say to Sadie, find the supermarket. And she knows where that is. She knows the door because I've taught her where that door is. And by going there multiple times and giving her a food reward every time we get to the supermarket and saying, yay, Sadie, this is the supermarket. So that's how guide dogs work. And so Sadie and I are like a team. We work together. And it's another way of thinking about it is Sadie is like, say, a five-year-old child. And I did this the other day. I've got a friend who has a 5-year-old child, and I wanted to go to my mum's house. And my mum has just moved into a new house, and it's very exciting. She's moved into a house which is 3 doors down from me. And because I live on a circuit, it's a circle. My house is here and mum's house is here. But because we're in a circle, our fences meet. So we've actually made a hole in the fence, and I can sneak through the fence from my house to mum's house. I can go through the fence. So I hope my little drawing in the air made sense. But anyway, I can go through the fence. And so Sadie was busy. So I said to my 5-year-old friend, can you show me the way through the fence? And so I took her hand, and she knew that she wasn't to lead me into anything, and she had to stop when she opened the gate, and she knew she had to take care of me. It's like Sadie, she knows she has to take care of me, and she knows she has to do certain things like stop at roads and things like that. But it's like being led around by a 5-year-old. She doesn't know absolutely everything that she has to do. So that's how our guide dog works. And so we work as a team. And so when I get a new guide dog, I have to develop a bond with that dog. And because I trust it. I've had male and female guide dogs. I trust the dog with my life and with my safety. And that's really hard. But I've broken this process of change down into 3 steps, as I've said before. And before I go on to those 3 steps, let's go to a break. So stay right there, and I'll see you on the other side.
Mr. Happy Living here. I love good things made for good people. That's why I love Happy Living's online e-course. It's an 8-week-long deep dive into you and the inspired life you want to live. The life you were put here on this earth to live. the one that you and only you can live. 8 weeks of lectures and ideas and topics and supporting materials and powerful self-improvement tools, all designed for you, all designed to help you create the tools and the power and the confidence you need to discover your purpose and to discover the life you were meant to live, and to feel incredibly inspired and motivated to decide you will live your life to its fullest. It's all designed to help you create the unique and distinct philosophy of you and your inspired life. Go to happyliving.com, select our e-course, and save $100 with promo code WYTV7. And for every enrollment, I'll donate another $100 to WYTV7. For $300 and about 30 hours, I promise you'll never, ever be the same again.
Hello and welcome back to the Purpose Vision Future Show, and thank you to our lovely sponsors who make this broadcast possible and other lovely broadcasts on this show. And before I go on, please, if you are enjoying this show and the other shows on this network, please do donate, because your donation makes these broadcasts possible. And I must apologize for my croaky voice. It's spring here, or it's summer here in Australia, and we've had a very wet summer, and so there's a lot of flowers are blooming, and there's a lot of pollen in the air. So I've got hay fever, so I apologize for my croaky voice. So before the break, we were talking about me getting a guide dog and going through the process of change. And I said that I was going to tell you the 3 steps which you can go through to deal with change, which is being imposed on you. So the first step that you need to go through is to prepare for the change. And how you do that is you learn as much as you can about the change, and you learn about the consequences of going through that change. Now, mostly when I have got guide dogs in the past, Sadie's my 4th guide dog. So with my first 3 guide dogs, I didn't know anything about them. I didn't know their name. I didn't know anything about them. I didn't know anything about them until I met them. But with Sadie, I was really lucky, because Sadie had been sponsored by a pet food company. So there was quite a bit about her on social media. So I was able to read about her on Facebook, read stories about her, and friends described photos of her to me. So I knew a little bit about her. And I was also able to, shortly after I met her, was able to get in contact with her puppy raiser. And that is the person who raised Sadie from the time she was 6 weeks old until the time she started her training at the Guide Dog Training Centre when she was around 12 months old. So I was able to get onto her puppy raiser, and we're still friends. And I was able to find out about the things that Sadie's likes and dislikes, and her favourite toys, and some of the mischief she got up to, and that was really, really helpful. In fact, I've made friends with all the puppy raisers of all my 4 guide dogs, because they can be an invaluable source of information. So prepare for the change. Step 2 is create space for the change. And there are a number of different ways you can do that. Firstly, you need to let go of what was before the change, so that you can accept what is to come. And so I get a new guide dog every 8 to 10 years, and the things change slightly. Training methods change slightly. Every dog's personality is different. And they even have this thing called second dog syndrome, which, we all go through when we get when we go from our first guide dog to our second guide dog, you keep comparing. Oh, my previous dog didn't do this. And, oh, well, when I did that, my dog did this and stuff. And you got to let go of all that stuff. I find each time that I have to let go of all those things. And I have to let go of the previous ways I used to do things. And so I can give space and go into the new guide dog with an open mind and a clear mind. The other second way you can make space for the change is dealing with grief, because sometimes change does cause grief. In fact, it often causes grief. And every time I change guide dogs, I have a certain amount of grief because I'm breaking one bond and I'm forming another one. And it's hard to break that bond. It's sad. Excuse me. With Pebbles and so I've had 4 guide dogs. Their names have been Gypsy, Pebbles, Gillies, and now Sadie. With transferring from Gypsy to Pebbles and from Pebbles to Gillies, as I said, I had a certain amount of grief, but transferring from Gillies to Sadie, it was much worse, because transferring from with the first 3 dogs, I still had them. And so, they went to live with my parents, and I was able to go and see them regularly, 2 to 3 times a week when I went to my parents' house for dinner. I still saw the dogs, so I didn't have that sense of loss. Yes, I broke the bond, but I didn't have a sense of loss. I still got to see the dogs and hug them, and I knew that they were happy. But when I changed over from Gillies to Sadie, it was much harder, because with my, sorry, I'm not explaining this very well, but with my first 3 dogs, when you change guide dogs, often you'll think, okay, my dog's got to 10 years old. It's starting to get old now. I'll put my name down on the waiting list for a guide dog, because you don't always get a dog immediately, particularly if you've got certain requirements that the dog needs to fit. So you put your name on the waiting list, and then when a guide dog comes up, then you retire your previous dog and you can get a dog straight away. And that's what happened to me the first 2 times. But when Gillies was only 9 when he slipped a disc in his back. And so that caused him large amounts of pain. And then he couldn't work. And then when he got over that, he gradually started to lose the use of his back legs. And I had to have him put to sleep, which was heartbreaking. And while all that was going on, I very badly injured my knee. And it took me 6 months to recover and to get the strength back to be able to walk fast enough and far enough to be able to train with a guide dog. So there was quite a long gap between dogs. And because of that long gap, I also had to learn to use a long cane. And walking with a cane is very different, because you have to tap the cane in line with your steps so that you're covering the ground in front of you with the cane. And don't have one handy, but I'll show one to you next time. But walking with a guide dog is much more natural. You just hang on to the harness and walk. So I experienced grief on many levels, which I had to deal with before I got Sadie. But eventually I got Sadie. I got to stop using my cane, and everything was great. And digressing slightly, in 1992, I got to be on a TV ad for the Guide Dogs Association. And the person who made the ad, Ray Hall, he wrote this beautiful song, because he'd asked me, what's it like going between using a guide dog and using a cane? And I told him about it. And he wrote this beautiful song, which I won't sing to you because of my croaky voice, but I will recite it as a poem, and hopefully that will help you understand. I never found the time to smell the flowers. I never found the time to hear the birds. I was concentrating hard where I was going. I was listening, but I never really heard. Now I found the time to smell the flowers, time to listen to the song of life, time to stop and taste a summer shower, for you've brought something special to my life. You've helped me see the world through different eyes. And that's really what it is like to go from using a guide dog to, using a cane to having a guide dog. So, and also the last part of that second step of making space is forgiveness. Sometimes you have to forgive yourself for stuff. And if a change is being imposed on you, you might have to forgive yourself if you haven't behaved as well as you perhaps should or could have. Sometimes you have to forgive the person who's imposing the change upon you. So that's the two steps. The first step was preparing for the change, and the second step is making space for the change. And finally, the third step is accepting and committing to the change. Now, accepting change isn't just enough. You have to commit to it because change is hard. And sometimes when you go through a change, you sort of think, oh, I wish I could go back to the way it was, and I don't really like this change. And so you have to commit to it 100%. Every time I get a new guide dog, I have to commit to that dog 100%. And so that, when times get hard, and they do get hard, because the dog is like a small child, and with children, when they go through the terrible twos, they like to challenge you. Guide dogs do the same thing. Usually the third or fourth week into training, they like to test the boundaries. Are you really the person who's in charge of me now? Are you really the head of my pack? And so it does, there are days you have bad days and stuff. And so you have to commit to that change 100% to make it work. So I hope you found that helpful, even with my croaky voice and my going off on tangents. I hope that's all made sense to you. And if you need more information, just grab a copy of this book, Seeing by Vision, Not by Sight. You can get it from purposevisionfuture.com. And that information is also on the page for this broadcast. So please do pick up a copy. It's a good read, if I may say so myself. It's a good gift for someone else, and also a good gift for you. And don't worry about it being shipped from the US to Australia, from Australia to the US. The book is printed in the US, and so it will only cost you $29.95 Australian, which I don't know how much that is in US dollars, but it's less. It's probably around about $25 US. So yeah, go purchase the book. And so thank you for listening to another episode of this show. I will be back same time, same place next week. And before I go, I will leave you with my usual piece of encouragement. If you are facing a challenge which seems a little bit too big or a little bit overwhelming, you've got this. Just dig down deep inside, grab out that courage, which I know that's in you, and you'll be just fine. Thank you.